welcome to another episode of the Dennis Rillo Howell Show. In each episode, I will have conversations with people in the fields of psychology, mental health, and well-being to help you gain a greater understanding of human behavior and of yourselves. A brilliant guest today is a mental health advocate and author, Maxwell Guttman. Welcome to the DRH Show.
Hello.
Okay, so it's a pleasure to have you here on the show, Max. You've been writing a lot of articles for PsychReg, and you've also spoken at a mental health event which I organized in London last December 2018. But for anyone who doesn't know about you, can you please tell us who you are, what you do, what your core beliefs are?
Sure. I guess to call me a mental health advocate is makes sense. I'm a mental health therapist by trade, social worker, a licensed clinical social worker, and so social work is sort of the field of study from which I sort of view how to practice within mental health, therapy in particular.
Mm-hmm.
So I practice psychotherapy. I have a private practice. I also teach young students or young adults rather, how to practice psychotherapy or practice family therapy within the social work context.
Okay. Can we mention the name of the university where you're teaching?
Sure. I work at Fordham University. I teach down in Lincoln Center.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an adjunct there. And I teach family-oriented treatment. So it's basically family therapy within the social work context.
Okay, thank you. It sounds really like a very diverse and very, very busy background that you've got. And I also understand that you're an author. I've actually read your book. What inspired you to write your two books? You've written University on Watch and Small Fingernails. Could you please tell us what they are about? And also, is there another book on the way?
Sure. Well, I guess that harkens back to your first question more about me. I'm a person also of lived experience with mental health and mental illness. So mental University on Watch is sort of about my experience with first onset of schizophrenia symptoms or first episode psychosis in my academic setting. So when I was a student at Binghamton University, an undergraduate student, in my last semester, I encountered rather serious symptoms of schizophrenia. I didn't know I was sick at the time, but everyone around me was saying I was alarming, I was this, I was that, and the world seemed different. I just couldn't put my finger to it. But the book is about my emerging illness in that context. It's a work of creative fiction, but it's also a memoir. So it leaves a little bit of the unknown left to the reader to unpack, which is important because I wanted a bit of the unknown there for the reader to wrestle with, because I was wrestling with the unknown. And that was sort of what I was struggling with, what's happening to me. So I wanted a reader to also not only just read it, but also follow along that journey of the mysteriousness and the intriguing aspect of the illness. While it was that, until it became something very, very disturbing. And then it was just point blank obvious, hopefully, to the reader what was happening. So that's University on Watch. What inspired me to write the book? Well, when I came home from the hospital 10 years ago, my friends, one of the characters in the book is McDaggett. He was my roommate, and he said to me, Max, you have to write this down. I was an English major then. And he said, it has to be recorded. It has to be documented, which I'm glad I did, because a few of those chapters that I wrote down when I first got home later got enmeshed into the larger work. Most of the book was written over just a period of a few months, but some of it harkened back to about 10 years ago when I first got out of the hospital. Hopefully, the reader won't be able to distinguish which is which. I think it's all great material.
Yeah, I think you've done a good job.
Thank you. So Small Fingernails is the prequel to University on Watch. It really is about my underlying mood disorder and depression coming out of high school. And it's a bit more jovial at times. It's a bit more sarcastic, I wouldn't say. I'd say that it's flamboyant and very. It followed me as a young adult before my mental illness when I was flippant and young and brash, and it reads that way. And it's a little bit more interactive than University on Watch, where it's all in my head and everything is happening within as a it's very much internal thing. Small Fingernails, very external, a lot of characters, it's character driven. It really has to do with, it's a love story, and it's about how unrequited love could really, in a sense, without the right support, lead you down a path that could be a very dark path at times and perhaps leave you unbalanced. And it just so happened that I was left unbalanced and at predisposition to schizophrenia. So, those contributing factors all aligned, and it was the perfect storm, as they say. But what really inspired me to write these books was that I felt that I could put a spin on it, or at least a flavor that was more palatable to the reader, and allow the reader to really get a sense of what mental health is and what mental health is not, and not doing it from a social work perspective. These are interdisciplinary books. I come from an English background, Dennis. I've studied great novels when I was, coming of age and in the university, and I wanted to take all that knowledge and apply it to the work. I wanted these to be novels, not just memoirs of someone who's had a mental health disorder. That's boring, right?
Yeah, I think what you try to do with your book is just put in all the elements of your educational qualifications, and also your live experience. And I think what makes it special is that I'm not sure if you could really come across with books which is written by people with live experience. So I think it's something that people who have live experience, or looking after people who have mental health issues, they can relate to it. I just want to tie into my next question with your live experience.
Sure.
Is that why you are so passionate about mental health?
Is it why I'm so passionate?
Yeah.
Well, I'd say so. It's hard to say, because we only have this one life to live, right? And I know where I am now, and I know that who I am because of accumulation of circumstances, and I definitely would say that it's had an impact. It's had a big impact. But as I sort of gesture to in some of my work, I have family, an uncle and an aunt who I didn't get to know very well. Who both had schizophrenia, and I never got to meet my uncle in person. I met my aunt once. They both died very young. But making a long story short, when I came into practice in Westchester County over here and became a social worker and started doing visits in adult homes and institutions in this area, I found myself in this building, and I'm like looking around, and I'm like, this place looks familiar. I was here once, and that's where my uncle had lived. And he lived in that adult home that I was visiting and from my work. And I realized that that's the place he lived, and that's the place he died, and I never really got to meet him. I remember the drawers, and I looked at some of the furniture in there. I'm like, wow, these are the memories. And I said to myself, I don't have children of my own right now, hopefully one day, but I do have nephews, and I don't want to be
That's
up
very nice to hear.
because of their mental health disorder. I don't want that to be. And I want to empower people to really have the families and the lives that they want, and really harness everything I know to get people to where they want to be.
Thank you for that. I'm quite sure that you're actually doing a good job of with your advocacy and mental health. And it seems like you've really been quite busy. You're writing, aside from the books that you've written, you're also writing online articles on Psycrash and of course on your own blog. And you're also teaching and you speak at mental health events. What keeps you going?
Well, there's always more. There's always more to be revealed. And there's so much unknown in this field. You know, sometimes I look around and I'm like, I say to myself, they quoted me there? Is that really something to be quoted? Is that something that's noteworthy? It took me to make that happen? Oh my God, I say to myself, like, if little old me is revealing so much in this field, it's not a good thing. I mean, not that I don't pride myself in my work, but oh man, we have a lot more. We have a ways to go. There's so many new therapies out there to be either invented or retooled to target new disorders or prior disorders, but new circumstances, and you know, I just know or hope that some of this passion is going to discover something one day that's going to make someone a lot healthier, or a whole body of people healthier, because we're really at the forefront and the precipice of modernity in terms of treatment. And just 50 years ago, people were being chained to beds, and now we look at what is restriction, and should this person really be on lockdown, and open units, and in a span of 20 years, we've come such a long way. Just imagine in 20 more years where we'll be, and I want to be a part of that.
Exactly. I get your point. That we've progressed a long way in terms of mental health, in terms of psychiatry, in terms of psychology, but ultimately there's still a lot of things that needs to be done. We're doing a lot of work in terms of, you know, educating the public about mental health, about conditions of lived experience, but ultimately we still have a lot of things to do, and hopefully writing books and hosting mental health events would, you know, help advance our advocacy. Yeah.
I agree.
Sorry.
I agree.
Yeah. You are a dedicated mental health blogger. I could tell that you always find time to send us articles, and also in managing your own blog. I haven't mentioned yet your own blog, but for those who are haven't heard of your blog, it's called Mental Health Affairs. So can you tell us how that blog came into being, and why are you so passionate about not just about mental health, but why are you so passionate about blogging?
Sure. Well, blogging is for me writing. And like I said, I come from a literary English. I come from a background where writing is revealing, and revealing is revealing knowledge. And when I blog, I think that I'm creating new knowledge, or hopefully trying to do so with the intention of doing so. And my blog came into being, Mental Health Affairs, after I said to myself, all right, it's time to put out my own sort of platform, my own stance in the mental health world. And, you know, there's a lot of camps out there, and I don't want to get into a whole discussion about the camps, but there are camps in the mental health world. We have our anti-psychiatry camps. We have folks that believe in medication, folks that are somewhere in between, folks that hate medication, folks that believe in every which way in terms of mental health. And I needed to sort of take a stance and draw my line in the sand and say, this is what I believe in. And my belief is that there's mental health, and which is creating pathways and spaces for people to stay healthy and be healthy. But there's also very much mental illness, and that illness is ugly. It can be very ugly, and I don't sugarcoat it in my blog. I don't, and there's a lot of folks out there that will say, "Oh, Max, I don't have an illness," and da 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 da, and maybe you want to, maybe that person should believe that for their own sake, because that'll help them in their recovery. But I believe in diagnosis for what it is. I believe that these are frameworks for understanding a greater narrative of the self. And my belief harkens back to the 1930s and 40s. Mental health affairs was born out of the Nazi phraseology, the Office of Jewish Affairs, and the Nazis took this office, and they basically said, they set up these Judenrats, which were houses to lodge complaints throughout Germany and Greater Germany, and basically it was a way to disguise the Holocaust almost, or what was going on. And these people would go and say, "Oh, this is happening to me," or "They took my home and they did this," and the people in the Judenrat, run by Jews mostly, would say, "Oh, I'm sorry," and they were houses to lodge complaints, but nothing else would happen because it was the Holocaust, and things would keep going. So mental health affairs is sort of my cynical, sardonic way of saying, hey, you have a mental health, there is mental health, there is mental illness, and we're going to talk about it all here. And hopefully, we're going to do something about it, unlike what happened back then to the Jews in Europe and in Germany. We're going to take mental health affairs, reappropriate that language, reclaim it, and say, this is our place in our house to do the work that we need for mental health and mental health research to raise the discourse that much further.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you for giving a very detailed background of your blog. It actually, I could actually perfectly relate to that. But we've got a different background, because unlike most mental health bloggers, I don't have a lived experience of mental health. So essentially what I'm trying to achieve is to give diverse perspectives on mental health a platform. Like you've mentioned earlier, there are people who have medical leanings towards mental health, and there are people who tend to focus more on the lived experience. And obviously you can't just look at mental health or any other things in life on a single prism. So it's best to offer a varied perspective. And that's essentially what I'm trying to do on PsychReg. So that's why I publish articles from people like yourself who've got lived experience, and from academics, and as well as from press agencies and press releases from universities. So I try to, shall we say, make a rich tapestry of mental health. And I do appreciate the contributions of writers like yourself.
And your blog definitely it has a rich tapestry, I'd say so. It's hard when you're in a position like mine, where you're sort of caught in the middle, sort of in between two worlds, where you have that professional experience and you have that lived experience, and you try to talk about it, and then you have people who disagree with you. It's as if I have what do they call it, a man without a country, or I don't have my own camp. I'm not stuck in one niche or another. I sort of, like you say, it should be a rich tapestry, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't see it that way. And I find myself in the middle of a maelstrom of arguments sometimes, and right in the center, lodged in the middle of the debate, where people are just slinging all sorts of names online and in group chats and saying, you don't define me clinician, and in the same realm, I'm trying to identify with these people with my lived experience, but they see me as a clinician, or vice versa. And it becomes very difficult to relate to people in that sense when you have so many identities.
Exactly.
So, there's that rich tapestry, but which is nice. But then you go the other extreme where the tapestry is so rich, people don't know what they're looking at, and they get confused, and they get scared, or they fear you. So keep doing what you're doing, Dennis, in terms of that medium that you found. I'd like to find it too.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, Max, I just want to we've been talking about your live experience and how you try to address the stigma and the many circumstances that surround mental health. Now, I just want to find out how do you take care of yourself given your mental health diagnosis? So do you still have a mental health diagnosis at the moment?
Well, I'd say it's interesting you put it that way. So the DSM sort of has it where after a certain amount of time, after there's no active symptoms, the symptoms are inactive. But I fully believe that with schizophrenia, it's my diagnosis, that it's a little bit more organic, and it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more organic.
What do you mean by organic?
Well, I don't, without getting into that whole conversation of, is it like a neurological, is it really neurological, as opposed to, because they want to reclassify schizophrenia, and not make it so much a serious mental illness, but more of a neurological disease, or another type of subset where it's, let's just say this. I don't believe that with my set of symptoms, with my particular experience with schizophrenia, that it's chronic. I mean, I know it's chronic, and that's part of how I take care of myself. It's not chronic. Like, I don't wake up every day and say, oh, well, it's another schizophrenic world for me today. I live like everybody else. And I just have to take very careful care of myself. I sent to you a blog article, I think it was Total Recovery. And I really meant it. Total recovery to me means you have to do everything in your power to stay healthy, or else you're going to get sick.
Yeah, and I think also we have to mention the role of social support. If I could just...
And social support.
Yeah, if I could mention
Sure.
this, your parents are very supportive. When you came to London last year, I'm really glad they came over to show support,
Yes.
Not only to the event, but you speaking at the event. That was very awesome.
They're huge. And that's why I in addition to medication and knowing your symptoms and doing everything in your power, we're nothing without the people around us. Especially if you're that chronic and that disordered, where on any given day something could go wrong, and you need to call upon help. And my parents have always been there, and that's why I've written about them so much, and I wrote a journal article about them too. Well, not just about them, but on the importance of support systems and prognosis. Without a good support system, the chronicity of my symptoms being so intense and so high, I really would be in a very different place without such great supports in my life. and knowing how to utilize supports, because you can have people there in your life, trust me, they're there, but if you don't know how to use them in the right way, what are they there for?
Exactly. So we really have to, be grateful for social support, especially for those people who've got lived experience like yourself. I just want to go back to your blogging career,
Sure.
if we can call it a career. What sets you apart from most of mental health advocates or mental health bloggers out there? You probably mentioned it earlier, but let's focus on the blogging aspect.
Sure. I would definitely say that it goes back to that. I don't sugarcoat anything. A lot of, I'm as real as it gets. And in terms of when I have an opinion, I'll put it out there and I'll make that opinion or stance known in very vivid terms. Now, you have other folks out there who speak in metaphor, or poetry, and sure, that's wonderful and that's great. Quite frankly, and personally, and even on a clinical level, I once had this conversation with a friend, actually, another therapist. He said, "You don't use metaphors, Max, in the therapy room?" I said, "Of course I do, but not folks with chronic and severe, schizophrenia or psychosis, because unless you're speaking in very concrete terms, they might not get it. You can speak in metaphor and they'll jump off a bridge thinking, you can say, well, you make a metaphor about a bridge and the beauty of it and getting to the other side, and you'll find your patient jumping off the bridge because, because they just don't see it and they don't get it. Psychosis sort of reduces you to this place where unless things are very concrete and laid out to you in a very clarified way, you may miss something. Given my history and my set of symptoms, I take those symptoms and I enmesh it into my writing. And I said, well, I want my writing to serve people as disordered as myself. And poetry would be one thing, maybe, if I had a different diagnosis, but I wanted my writing to be very declarative, very poignant, and really get the message across in a way that someone as disordered as myself, if I, let's say I was not doing as well as I was, would be able to get it. I want any person to be able to come off the street, read what I'm reading, read what I write, and say, oh, I get that. Because I guarantee you go to some of Pat Deegan's poetry out there, or some of the great names out there in mental health, or some of the newfangled, aspiring writers in mental health that take their stance and make it so obfuscated with such unintelligible prose that you don't know what they're saying, and that's not serving anybody. We need to make our writing as vivid as possible and as concrete as possible for everyone to get it, not just people within these cliques, or within this discipline, everyone out there in the world. And that's what I think sets me apart. I think any one of my articles could be in a newspaper, in not just a mental health blog, but a larger platform, and people would say, oh, I get that.
Exactly.
Not just people looking for mental health answers, but it could be in the New York Times. Make that, oh, okay, I get that. And when people read my writing, I think they get a part of me. Exactly. And I don't always see a part of other authors within their writing.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned that it's important to be concise and to be clear in trying to deliver the message when it comes to mental health. But what exactly is the most important thing that you want the public to know about your work and your life?
Well, that really I'm here for the public. I always say to people, what else do you want to know? Or what would you like me to research? What would you like me to spend my time focusing on? What would you like to hear about next? What would you like me to look at and say, to give an opinion on and my stance on? Because really I'm here to do that work and to really bring the public what they need. There's only so much I can clairvoyantly say, oh, they're gonna want to hear about this, or maybe I should write about that. I won't always know. Clearly, I don't always know. But if people come to me and say, and charge me with a with a task saying, Max, write about this, or we need this research, I'll do it. I'm more than happy to do it. I'm more than happy to go into any avenue, take any avenue in any direction, and harness whatever I need to do to get the work done to bring the public what they need. It's funny you say that. I've always said to, I always reach out to all these different organizations out there and say, well, what have you got going on? How could I help you? And they look at me like, oh, what? How could we help you? How could you help who? I'm like, no, how could I help you? How could I help you with your work? And I'm not looking for money. I'm not looking for recognition. I'm looking to get the job done. And I'm looking to get it done so that other people could go out there and be themselves and take the lessons learned from this experience and apply it to their own lives.
That's a very important message, Max, and I do congratulate you for that. But what are your plans for the future in terms of your writing and advocacy?
Sure.
Do you have any plans of writing another book?
I am writing another book. It's almost done. It may actually be done sometimes.
Do you have any title yet?
I do. It is called The Revisionist.
The Revisionist.
The Revisionist.
And if I'm not mistaken, that's your third book, isn't it?
It is the third book. It is the aftermath of University on Watch. People after, the University on Watch sort of ends. I won't give too much away if you haven't read it, but it ends with the initial steps of my recovery. And I didn't want to talk too much about it in that book, because really the book is about the crisis, and I didn't want to get off message. So what I did was I left the last few chapters, if you didn't notice, become more abstract and talk about things, the later aspects of my life, and in more abstract terms. The Revisionist really is another J. Peters book. By the way, I'm not sure if we talked about that. J. Peters is my pseudonym, and my pen name. And
no,
it really is.
Yourself now.
What'd you say?
No, you outed yourself.
I just outed myself, didn't I? Oh well. It's gonna happen. It will happen, and it does happen. But yes, it's another J. Peters book. It really is. It begins with walking out of the hospital and what that feels like all the way through my recovery, starting to work in mental health and understand myself as a prosumer, someone who's a professional in the field of mental health and someone with lived experience.
Okay. That was a very, very, very detailed plan, and I wish you all the best to your endeavors, Max. We're nearly going towards the end of this show,
Sure.
but I always ask this question. For those who would like to pursue a career in the field of psychology and mental health, what would be your key advice?
For those pursuing, just setting out, well, good question. I would have to say, get to know yourself. Get to know why you want to do this. I know that a lot of folks go out there in either social work or psychology, in either the clinical work or practicing as a psychotherapist or psychologist, sometimes for the wrong reasons, sometimes for the right reasons. But getting to know what those reasons are is step one. And and finding out not only what those reasons are, but what the implications will be for your future work and what your future work, what you want that to look like. If you can't see it, if you don't know why you're doing it, then you really have to say, is this for me? I really think that could be for anybody, truly. I think anyone could go out there and be the best therapist or best psychologist or best researcher, but getting a good idea of why you're doing it and what the goals are, well, you gotta connect the dots, and that's part of the work.
Yeah,
So
I think you also have to take into consideration your skill, because like myself, I don't think that I'm going to be an effective psychotherapist, but I could see myself being an academic, being a researcher. That's my side.
Right.
And also there are people who can't be an academic because they don't like doing boring stuff, so they choose to be a practitioner. So I think you also have to consider that. But the beauty of psychology, the beauty of mental health is that it's a very flexible field that you can actually harness your own skill. But thank you for that tip, Max. It's really useful. Max, it's been an insightful conversation with you, but
great.
Unfortunately, our time is up.
Really?
Yeah, hopefully we could talk again in the future.
Sure.
I'd love to thank you for sharing with us your journey. We look forward to hearing more about your work. Thank you for being on the Dennis Reloho Howell Show.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Max.
Take care.